Welcome to Free for the Fruit, where we talk about what it is that we need to do to prepare our minds, prepare our hearts to be free to receive the fruits of the Holy Spirit that He's trying to share with us. If you've ever thought, man, I know that I'm a Christian, but it seems like other people have more joy, more kindness, more self-control, more of this good stuff of the Holy Spirit than me, then you are not alone. This podcast is for you to help you figure out how to become free for the fruit.
Hello, welcome to today's episode of Free for the Fruit. I hope that you enjoyed last week's episode on the guided healing of memories. As I said on that episode, if that wasn't something that really resonated or worked for you, I just cannot encourage you enough that God still has healing for you, but different things work for different people. And so today we're going to be talking about another topic that can be challenging, can be triggering for some people. And I just really do want to go there because I think it's not talked about in the way that we're going to talk about it today enough. And that is the problem of loneliness. It does not take a rocket science to recognize that our culture has a huge issue with loneliness. We are more digitally connected than ever, but we're also more personally lonely than ever because now there is so many things to do really personally, privately, that used to only exist within community. So something as simple as like listening to music 300 years ago had to be a communal activity because you literally needed people there to play all the instruments and sing the song to be able to receive the music. And as these things have come more and more and more digitally available, we have less and less and less scenarios where we're coming together as people. And so, what I want to talk about today is really how we can address personal loneliness in ourselves. I don't know the answer for our culture. I know it's a heck of a lot less screens, but that is not something that I am like able to speak to on a national level or an international level on what should happen. But I do feel confident in sharing spiritually about how we can address the problem of our personal loneliness if this is something we're experiencing. So, just as a reminder, this month, our truth is that in every storm, God is here in the boat, or God is with me, not far away, but here in the boat with me. And this is on our Truth Bands Together bracelets for this month. We have them in adult and kid size, and it's a unisex color scheme and design this month. So it works great for boys and girls, women and men, and is a great reminder when you're going through the storms of life that God is with you. But that said, I am not probably alone in feeling like it's a little bit hokey to tell a lonely person, someone who's feeling lonely, that God is with them and like that's going to be enough. Like that's going to fix it or whatever. Because in the reality is that Adam was alone with God at the beginning of creation, and by that logic, he should have been good, and that should have been all he needed. But God saw that it wasn't good for him to be alone, right? And that's why he creates Eve, a helpmate for him, a peer, another human being to be with him, in addition to God being with him. And so, what happens in a lot of cases is that people who are very lonely can feel dismissed because it's like, well, God is with you. Like, that's like the pat on the head answer. It is true. It is powerful. It is the reality. But for so many people, they are experiencing what Adam experienced in the garden. Like, yeah, God is here and I'm experiencing him. I'm in the same parent child relationship as Adam because I'm baptized. But also, I need other people. I need other human beings because God himself recognizes that that is a good for humanity. And there are people who are called to celibacy. There's people that are called to hermetic life and not being around a lot of people. That is very much a specific call. That's not just something that is like expected across the board. Most people are expected to live their life in community. And historically, that was a lot easier to do because you are very limited on what you could even accomplish by yourself, what you even could do by yourself. And so having to come together for survival was part of what kept loneliness at bay for people historically. Whereas now, a person can do so much independently, seemingly independently, that it's much easier to fall into the trap of actually being alone and not having human beings around you. So, as we experience God present with us in every storm, there in the boat with us, we want to be clear about what we want to take from that and what we should not expect to take from that. First of all, God's presence with us is a beautiful gift. It's overwhelming. If you go back into a memory, like you actually were able to experience that last week of having Jesus take you into a memory and show you where he was in that, it's incredibly powerful. The presence of God is more than capable of sustaining us when it has to. But that's an extraordinary case when we are being asked to or called to rely solely on the grace of God. This would be the situation if we were like in the midst of a persecution, if you are being imprisoned for your faith or something like that. God is going to show up for you in that. God is going to be present with you in that. You might not experience it powerfully in the moment, but the reality of it is powerfully true that he is there with you as he is in all situations. But in most situations, we are also called to proximity with other people. That's why the family is such a good thing. That proximity to other people is really, really, really good for us. It is part of what shapes us in positive ways as a human being. Iron sharpens iron, right? We can go on our merry way being kind of, set in our worst habits and our worst personality traits if we don't have the kind of the grinding effect, the sanding effect of other people around us. So, God with you in those storms is meant to create a firm foundation for you. And this is what it is meant to do in all of life, right? God should be the center of our identity. The fact that we are building ourselves, our self concept, our lives, everything on the rock of what it is that God says about us over and above anything that anybody else could ever say about us or ever think about us, including ourselves. When we center on what it is that God says about us, we find ourselves in a position where we are able to build community and be with other people in a way that we are not able to when we aren't built on God. And this can kind of show up in two different ways. People who have their identity based in relationships, achievements, struggles can feel on one end of the spectrum like they have to show up as like total excellence personified in community. They might be very motivated to do that because they want the achievement, they want the accolade, they want the praise of peers to help shore up the fact that they're not even built on a firm foundation and they're kind of trying to cobble something together. On the other end of the spectrum, you can have people who very much struggle to put themselves out there in relationships and community at all because they don't have any sense of their own inherent value. They really struggle to value themselves. And their logic is kind of like, since I don't even value me, why would anybody else even value me? And that is very challenging to overcome. I think that's the place, although the whole spectrum breeds loneliness, because when you're just trying to perform for people, you're not developing authentic, vulnerable, really good connections with people. This whole spectrum of showing up to community and relationships with other people lives on your concept of yourself being built on something that can't sustain it. So I recently gave a retreat where I talked about how like building on relationships is like building on one of those big foam pads that like goes on a lake or a big swimming pool where you can stand on it, like it's pretty good, but if you try and like put a bunch of weight on it or you try and jump off of it, it's going to just sink and sink and sink and sink, and it's going to be more clear the more pressure you put on it that it's actually not on firm, stable ground. It's actually on the water where you can sink. Same with achievements. That's like trying to, stack a tower of papers that you're going to stand on. And that tower, like a Jenga tower, is going to fall down at some point, or you're going to be scrambling to get back up it because it's just like thin things stacked on top of each other. It's just this little thing for you to stand on. And ultimately, if you've ever carried like a big stack of paper or something like that, something slips out in the middle and it all goes. And that's the same as we experience trying to build our identity on achievements. And then, though we don't usually consciously build our identity on struggles, we will organically experience that in a lot of situations. And that's like building on like rotting, termite infested boards where you are 100% aware of how much this is not going to hold you up, but you feel like it's all you have. You feel like hiding how messy and messed up this is a huge part of what you're responsible for. And so in that spectrum, you have people building on a variety of less than ideal foundations. And it makes it really challenging to take the leap into a new interpersonal relationship. Our lack of a grounded identity makes it more likely that we are going to experience profound loneliness in our lives. Because if you're dealing with struggles, you're going to feel like no one can know. If you're dealing with achievements, you're going to be constantly just looking at what you can get out of the relationship with a person, not in a mercenary way in a lot of cases, but just kind of like, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Have I done enough? Is this good enough? And there's not the openness to be vulnerable that relationships really need to survive. And then if you're looking at just building your identity on relationships, it's going to be hard for you to build other relationships other than maybe just your marriage or your parent-child relationship or your relationship with your sibling that is like the core thing of who you are. Because it's going to feel like any investment in a different relationship, in another relationship, is taking something away from that relationship that is at the core of your identity. We're invited to experience all these things, experience struggle, experience achievement, experience relationships, but to have a boundary so that these things do not become our core identity, the thing that is most true about us. What is most true about us needs to always be that firm foundation of what it is that God says about us. This is the place where we are able to jump off into a new relationship, try something new, reach out to somebody, join a new community. And if it doesn't work out, we are okay. We are not dependent on what it is that we have to receive from those people in order to be okay. And so, therefore, if you are currently in a state of loneliness, a period of loneliness in your life, I think the primary invitation is to come to view yourself the way that God views you, to align your self concept with God's concept of you, so that you are able to try vulnerability, a new community, a new relationship from a place where you are detached in a healthy way from the outcome of that. Because that is the place where those like good things can develop. You can actually develop a new relationship that is virtuous and life-giving to both of you because you didn't put a weight on it that it's not meant to bear, because you are okay even if it doesn't work out. And this is not in a like manipulative, using people detached way. This is in a, I am a daughter of God, whether or not you like me. I like you. I would like to be in a relationship with you. I'm comfortable being vulnerable saying that, because if you turn around and kind of worst fear happens and someone's like, "Oh my gosh, I absolutely hate you. I have no interest in being friends with you." That's going to hurt. but it's not ultimately going to impact the foundation on which my life is built. And I'll feel sad about it for a little bit, and I'll ultimately move on because it did not impact the core of what it is that is my identity. I know so many people in my life who are struggling with this really heavy loneliness, and I see in them, though I know I am not privy to the full internal reality of their situation, I see in them that lack of awareness of what it is, the good things that God says about them. Maybe they know it in their heads, but they're struggling to experience it in their hearts. And that's a painful place to be. And so I want to end by sharing a story that I've told so many times. So if you've heard it before, I'm sorry, but I think it's a good one and we're sharing again. Just about how God addressed this issue in me. I was 100% achievement addicted. I was very focused on the external things that I achieved. And I felt like if I got rid of that, if I was not so achievement focused, that I wouldn't achieve anything anymore. Like I would just be complacent and do nothing and slothful and whatever. But I also knew that I could not go on the way that I was living, that this needing validation from other people was was already such a problem, was going to continue to be such a problem, that it was going to impact my ability to be able to impact other people. And so I had mentors that were kind of like, yeah, you really need to pump the brakes and deal with this. And so I was in prayer, praying to our Lord about what was going on. And I was sharing all the reasons that it was impossible for me to change my self concept at all, to raise my self worth in any way, because there was all these factors and I'd always been this way and my personality and all these things. And as I'm talking with Jesus in my imagination, my current identity at that time manifested like this big, heavy cloak that I was wearing, like this big cape. And it was kind of like a weighted blanket where it was really heavy and really warm and kind of smelly and not a good thing, but it was also really comforting. It was really normalizing to me to have it on. And the concept of taking it off felt very scary. And so, as I was talking about how it's impossible and this is never going to happen and all these things, Jesus just reaches up. And again, I'm imagining this. He just reaches up and he flicks the knot on the cape and it falls off. And I just freaked out. I was like, no, 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 no. This was supposed to be a hypothetical conversation. What the heck are you doing? Like, give that back. And Jesus just kind of laughed at me and he said, I know. I just wanted you to know that I could. And I've always sat with that since then. The fact that Jesus wanted me to know that he could just take away what I was dealing with. But the reason he didn't is because I didn't actually want that. I wasn't actually ready for that. I needed to go the long way around with him. And he was down for that too. And so he let me pick it back up and put it back on. And that's what I did. And I said, Jesus, but I still want to deal with this. And he said, do you think you could come back here and practice? And so that's exactly what I did. For about 6 months, I would come back to a time of prayer and I would practice taking off the cloak. I would sit down in prayer with him. I would be with him. I would take it off and just kind of get used to being without it, where it was just alone, him and me. And it took some time, like I said, about 6 months, but eventually I stopped feeling like I needed to put it back on. I started seeing myself the way that he saw me and experiencing the freedom that came with that of not wearing this big, heavy cloak all the time. And so in the years since, I have seen in myself an ability to be able to recognize when I'm feeling lonely and actually do something about it, actually reach out to someone, actually make a connection. Because ultimately, if it doesn't work out, I know that I will still be okay. I'm not a robot now. I'm not an automaton where you can't hurt my feelings, but it won't strike at the core of who I am. So If you are going through a period of loneliness right now, first of all, I want to tell you that this framing of the issue is not to say that your loneliness is your fault. It's simply showing that you're experiencing this because you were meant to be in relationship with other people. Like it makes sense that this would be painful because you are not experiencing what you are meant to experience as a human being. And if it is fear that is holding you back from being the one to reach out and being the one to make the connections, looking at your personal identity and letting God do some work there is a actual actionable way to grow in this area so that then you are able to be more comfortable and confident as well as appropriately detached when you reach out to make new connections with people. The fact that God is always with you through every storm, they're nearby, not far away, is what can give us the confidence to then build closer relationships with each other, to reach out to other people and to actually let them in. I hope that this month has been a blessing to you. One last time, I just want to share with you that our truth band together is where the truth for the month comes from. These are elastic bracelets. We have them in kids and adult sizes. This month's style is unisex, so it works great for boys and girls, women and men. And it has this message about God being there in the boat with you. So I encourage you to check that out. There are links in the show notes. I will be back in the month of September with a brand new truth and a brand new series on how we can wire that truth into our daily lives.